The ghost of Chinatown Lantern Lane. San Francisco's Chinatown is alive with colors, sounds, and tantalizing aromas during the Lunar New Year. Red lanterns sway in the wind, their warm glow reflecting off cobblestone streets, and the rhythmic beat of drums and cymbals echoes in celebration. Among the festive chaos, however, lies a quieter, darker legend whispered among the older residents. The story of Mei Ling, the ghost of Lantern Lane. Mei Ling arrived in San Francisco in the late 1800s, part of the wave of Chinese immigrants seeking better lives. She was young, barely 20, with a face as delicate as porcelain and dreams as vast as the Pacific. Her parents had sent her ahead to pave the way for the family's reunion. With a small inheritance sewn into her garments, she secured lodging and began working tirelessly as a seamstress. Every stitch she made was a step closer to bringing her family to America. But fate was cruel. Letters from her family grew sporadic and then ceased altogether. Mei Ling's savings dwindled as she continued to pay for letters that never arrived. Loneliness gnawed at her heart, and despair darkened her once bright spirit. One fateful Lunar New Year's Eve, Mei Ling walked in a lantern lane, a narrow, dimly lit alley adorned with rows of red lanterns, and disappeared. Some said she left Chinatown to start anew elsewhere. Others whispered that her grief had driven her to take her own life. Not long after her disappearance, rumors began to circulate about strange occurrences in Lantern Lane. It started with faint humming. On quiet nights, shopkeepers near the alley would hear a soft, melodic tune drifting through the air. The song was unfamiliar, melancholic, and hauntingly beautiful. Soon, people began to report glimpses of a woman in a flowing red cheongsam, her figure illuminated by the soft glow of a lantern. She would appear at the far end of the lane, her steps slow and deliberate, as if searching for something or someone. One shopkeeper, Mr. Chun, claimed to have seen her face. Her eyes, he said, were filled with such sorrow that I couldn't move. She looked at me for a moment and then vanished, leaving behind the faint scent of jasmine. Over time, Mei Ling's appearances became an annual occurrence. Every Lunar New Year's Eve, she would materialize just as the lanterns were lit. Those brave enough to approach her claimed she held a glowing red envelope in her hands. The envelope, traditional for gifting money during the new year, was said to contain gold coins. However, it came with a condition. The recipient had to leave an offering of incense in Lantern Lane before taking the envelope. Those who followed this ritual reported a year of extraordinary luck and prosperity. But those who ignored her or took the envelope without making an offering were said to suffer strange misfortunes, business failures, accidents, or inexplicable illnesses. One Lunar New Year, a young journalist named Emily decided to investigate the legend for a feature story. Skeptical but intrigued, she arrived in Chinatown armed with her camera and notepad. She interviewed locals, many of whom spoke reverently of Mei Ling's spirit. Some warned her not to disturb the ghost, but Emily brushed off their concerns. As midnight approached, Emily positioned herself at the entrance of Lantern Lane. The alley was eerily quiet, the festive sounds of the celebration muffled by the narrow walls. The lanterns cast a dim, flickering light, their shadows dancing like restless spirits. Just as she began to doubt the tale, she heard it, a soft, mournful humming. Emily turned and saw her. Mei Ling's figure was unmistakable, her red cheongsam shimmering like liquid fire. She held a lantern in one hand and a red envelope in the other. Her face, though ethereal, bore an expression of deep sorrow. Emily froze, her camera slipping from her hands. Summoning her courage, Emily whispered, "Who are you?" Mei Ling did not respond. Instead, she extended the red envelope toward Emily, her movements slow and deliberate. Remembering the locals' warnings, Emily pulled a stick of incense from her bag and lit it, placing it on the ground before approaching the spirit. Mei Ling's lips curved into a faint smile, and she nodded before fading into the shadows. The envelope felt warm in Emily's hands. When she opened it, she found 3 gold coins inside, their surfaces etched with intricate patterns. She left Chinatown that night, unsure if what she had experienced was real or a vivid dream. Emily's article brought renewed attention to Lantern Lane. Tourists and paranormal enthusiasts flocked to Chinatown, hoping to catch a glimpse of Mei Ling. While some claimed to hear her humming or see her shadow, none reported the same vivid encounter as Emily. Driven by curiosity, Emily returned to Chinatown a year later, determined to learn more. She discovered old records indicating that Mei Ling's family had perished in a shipwreck en route to San Francisco. Overwhelmed by guilt and despair, Mei Ling had taken her own life in Lantern Lane. Determined to bring closure to Mei Ling's restless spirit, Emily worked with the community to hold a traditional ceremony. Offerings of food, incense, and paper money were burned, accompanied by prayers for Mei Ling's peace. That year, for the first time in decades, no one reported seeing Mei Ling in Lantern Lane. Though Mei Ling's ghost has not been seen since the ceremony, her story remains a cherished part of Chinatown's folklore. Lantern Lane, once a shadowy, neglected alley, is now a place of remembrance. Each Lunar New Year, residents hang extra lanterns in her honor, their light symbolizing hope and reunion. Visitors still walk Lantern Lane, some hoping for a supernatural encounter, others simply moved by the tale of a young woman whose love and longing transcended death. And on quiet nights, when the wind carries the faint scent of jasmine, some say you can still hear Mei Ling's song, a gentle reminder that even in sorrow, there is beauty. The Lady of the Lunar Feast. Tucked away in a quiet neighborhood of Los Angeles stands an old Victorian mansion. Its once bright, paint faded, and its windows shrouded by heavy curtains. To the untrained eye, it is merely a relic of a bygone era, but to the locals, it is the epicenter of a chilling tale. The story of Madame Lien, the Lady of the Lunar Feast. The mansion was built in the early 1900s by a wealthy Chinese immigrant named Mr. Lien, a prominent businessman who brought his young bride, Mei Lien, to America. Madame Lien, as she was fondly called, was renowned for her elegance, warmth, and devotion to her community. Every Lunar New Year, she hosted an extravagant banquet at the mansion, inviting neighbors and friends to celebrate the holiday with traditional dishes, music, and vibrant decorations. Tragedy struck during one such celebration. On the eve of the Year of the Dragon, a fire broke out in the mansion's kitchen. Despite the chaos, Madame Lien stayed behind to ensure her guests escaped safely. She was never seen alive again. When the flames were extinguished, her body was discovered in the dining room, clutching an ornate jade bowl filled with rice. Locals believe she was preparing an offering to her ancestors when the fire consumed her. The mansion was rebuilt, but Madame Lien's spirit never left. Her presence became most palpable during the Lunar New Year, as if she continued to host her grand banquets in the afterlife. Years later, the mansion passed into the hands of the Zhang family. Unfamiliar with the house's history, they decided to host a New Year's Eve dinner to honor their ancestors. As the guests gathered, strange things began to happen. Plates and bowls arranged neatly on the table shifted on their own. The aroma of unfamiliar dishes wafted through the air, though none had been cooked in their kitchen. Late in the evening, a spectral figure appeared at the head of the dining table. It was a woman dressed in an ancient silk robe, her hair adorned with golden pins. Her expression was serene, yet her presence sent chills down the spines of the guests. Without a word, she gestured for everyone to sit. Terrified but unable to resist, the family and their guests obeyed. The apparition then seemed to vanish into thin air, leaving behind the faint sound of music and laughter. Word of the haunting spread quickly, and soon, the mansion became a source of fascination and fear. The older residents of the neighborhood claimed that Madame Lien's spirit returned every Lunar New Year to host her eternal banquet. Those who respected her traditions and joined her feast reported feeling a warm presence and even receiving blessings of good fortune. However, those who disrespected the ritual faced unsettling consequences: broken heirlooms, eerie whispers in the night, and a lingering sense of unease that lasted for weeks. In the early 1990s, a group of paranormal investigators decided to spend the Lunar New Year's Eve in the mansion. Armed with cameras, recording devices, and traditional offerings, they hoped to document Madame Lien's ghost. As the clock struck midnight, the temperature in the dining room plummeted. The investigators noticed a faint glow emanating from the table, where dishes began to materialize out of thin air. Steamed fish, dumplings, and bowls of sweet glutinous rice. Then, Madame Lien appeared, her figure translucent but unmistakably elegant. She walked around the table, arranging the dishes and lighting candles. One investigator, overwhelmed by curiosity, attempted to touch her. Immediately, the room was filled with a piercing wail, and the figure disappeared. The team's equipment malfunctioned for the rest of the night, and their recordings captured only static interspersed with faint whispers in Mandarin, saying, "Respect the feast." The Chung family, who moved into the mansion in the early 2000s, experienced Madame Lien's presence firsthand. Determined to honor the traditions of the home, they prepared an elaborate Lunar New Year feast. As they placed the final dish on the table, the lights flickered, and a cool breeze swept through the room despite the windows being closed. Moments later, Madame Lien appeared. She nodded approvingly at the spread and took a seat at the head of the table. The family, initially frozen with fear, decided to join her. They ate in silence, their unease slowly replaced by a sense of calm. As the meal ended, Madame Lien smiled and faded away. The Changs reported a year of unparalleled prosperity and harmony, attributing their good fortune to the Lady of the Lunar Feast. Over the years, locals developed a ritual to honor Madame Lien. On Lunar New Year's Eve, they leave offerings of food and incense at the mansion's doorstep. Those brave enough to dine in the mansion ensure the table is set with traditional dishes, including steamed whole fish, longevity noodles, and sweet rice cakes. It is said that the more effort put into the feast, the greater the blessings bestowed by Madame Lien. However, the ritual comes with a warning. No one should speak ill of the feast or disrupt the proceedings. Those who do risk invoking Madame Lien's wrath. Stories tell of a guest who mocked the tradition and was later plagued by misfortune, from losing his job to enduring sleepless nights filled with unsettling dreams of fire and smoke. Though the mansion is no longer inhabited, it remains a focal point of Lunar New Year celebrations in the neighborhood. Visitors leave offerings at the gate, and some claim to see faint lights in the windows or hear the faint tinkling of laughter and music late at night. Madame Lien's story has become a cherished legend, a reminder of the importance of tradition, respect, and community. For those who honor her, the Lady of the Lunar Feast continues to be a benevolent guardian, ensuring the prosperity and unity of those who celebrate her eternal banquet. The Red Silk Bride of Boston. In the heart of Boston's Chinatown, nestled among bustling streets and vibrant shops, lies a small park known for its stone pagodas and serene koi ponds. By day, it is a tranquil retreat for locals and tourists alike. But by night, particularly during the Lunar New Year, the park transforms into the setting of an eerie legend, the tale of the Red Silk Bride. The story begins in the early 1900s with a young woman named Li Fun. She was the daughter of a prominent merchant and was betrothed to a man from another influential family in Chinatown. Their union was expected to strengthen ties between the two families, and plans for a grand wedding were set in motion. Li Fun's mother spent months handcrafting her red silk wedding gown, a masterpiece embroidered with golden dragons and phoenixes, symbols of prosperity and harmony. On the day of the wedding, the streets were adorned with lanterns, and the air buzzed with excitement. However, as the ceremony approached, the groom failed to appear. Hours passed, and whispers of betrayal spread through the crowd. Li Fun, humiliated and heartbroken, fled the wedding procession, still clad in her exquisite gown. Her body was discovered days later in the park's pond. It was said she had drowned herself, clutching the red silk veil that had once symbolized her dreams of love and happiness. Since that tragic day, sightings of Li Fun, known as the Red Silk Bride, have haunted the park. The earliest documented sighting occurred in 1932, A group of young men returning from a New Year's celebration claimed to see a woman in a red gown standing by the pond. Her veil obscured her face, but her posture was unmistakably sorrowful. As they approached, she turned to face them, revealing a visage pale and wet, her eyes brimming with tears. Before they could react, she vanished, leaving behind only the faint scent of jasmine. Over the years, the Red Silk Bride became a fixture of Chinatown folklore. Locals claim she appeared every Lunar New Year, searching for her lost groom. Those who encountered her described an overwhelming sense of sadness, as if her despair reached out to envelop them. Some believed she sought justice for her broken heart, while others thought she merely longed for someone to acknowledge her pain. The legend took a darker turn when stories emerged of those who disrespected the Red Silk Bride's memory. A young couple, dismissive of the ghostly tales, decided to mock the legend by reenacting a fake wedding at the park. That night, they were both struck by inexplicable misfortune. Their car broke down, their valuables were stolen, and they were plagued by nightmares of drowning. This led to the belief that the Red Silk Bride cursed those who mocked her or dismissed her sorrow. To appease her, locals began leaving red ribbons and small offerings by the pond during the Lunar New Year. These tokens were said to soothe her spirit, ensuring her sadness would not turn to anger. In 1987, a group of paranormal enthusiasts decided to spend the Lunar New Year's Eve in the park to document the Red Silk Bride's presence. Armed with cameras, voice recorders, and incense, they set up by the pond as midnight approached. At the stroke of 12, the air grew cold, and a thick mist rolled over the water. One member spotted a faint figure in the distance, draped in red. The apparition moved gracefully, her veil fluttering as though caught in an unseen breeze. The team's equipment captured strange phenomena: whispers in Mandarin, the faint rustle of silk, and a woman's soft sobbing. When one investigator, emboldened by curiosity, attempted to touch the apparition, the figure dissolved, and a sudden gust of wind extinguished their candles. They left the park shaken, but convinced they had encountered the legendary bride. In 2015, a young chef named Daniel, new to Boston's Chinatown, decided to visit the park after hearing the legend from coworkers. Intrigued but skeptical, he brought a red ribbon to leave by the pond as a gesture of respect. As he tied the ribbon to a tree branch, the air around him grew still. He turned to see a woman in a red gown standing across the pond. Her veil obscured her face, but her sorrow was palpable. Daniel felt an inexplicable urge to apologize, though he didn't know why. He whispered, "I'm sorry for your pain," and the figure nodded slightly before fading into the mist. Daniel's encounter changed him. He began visiting the park every Lunar New Year to leave offerings for the Red Silk Bride, believing that acknowledging her sorrow brought peace, not only to her, but to himself as well. Today, the park remains a central part of Boston's Lunar New Year celebrations. Alongside the traditional festivities, locals honor the Red Silk Bride with quiet rituals. Red ribbons, incense, and small trinkets are placed by the pond to soothe her restless spirit. Some believe these gestures not only honor her memory, but also ensure good fortune for the year ahead. Despite the somber nature of her story, the Red Silk Bride has become a symbol of resilience and remembrance. Her tale serves as a poignant reminder of the enduring power of love and the pain of its loss. And on misty Lunar New Year nights, when the park is quiet and the lanterns cast their gentle glow, some say you can still see her, a lone figure in red, her veil drifting like a whisper in the wind, searching for the love she lost but has never forgotten. The Librarian's Lament. In the quiet suburbs of Seattle lies an old library, its red brick exterior adorned with faded carvings of dragons and phoenixes. Known as the Evergreen Lunar Library, it is a place of knowledge and culture, built by early Chinese immigrants in the 1920s to preserve their heritage. Today, it is famed not only for its rare books, but also for a chilling legend that resurfaces every Lunar New Year: the story of the ghost librarian. The library was established by Madame Jing Wei, a passionate scholar and educator who believed that the community's strength lay in its connection to its roots. She dedicated her life to collecting manuscripts, scrolls, and books that captured the traditions, language, and history of her homeland. To her, the library was a sanctuary where knowledge and culture could thrive. But Madame Jingwei's dream was cut short. On the eve of the Lunar New Year in 1935, a devastating fire engulfed the library. Though many of the books were saved, Madame Jingwei was trapped inside, trying to rescue an ancient manuscript. Her body was never recovered, and some claimed to see her figure amidst the flames, clutching the manuscript until the very end. After the fire, the library was rebuilt, grander than before. However, strange occurrences began to surface during the Lunar New Year. Visitors reported hearing the rustle of pages in empty rooms or catching a glimpse of a shadowy figure moving between the shelves. The air would grow cold in certain corners, and faint whispers in Mandarin filled the silence, reciting poetry or ancient proverbs. The most unsettling phenomenon was the appearance of a woman in traditional robes, her hands cradling a book as she floated silently through the aisles. Though she appeared peaceful, her presence brought an overwhelming sense of sorrow. Over time, the legend of the ghost librarian grew. It was said that Madame Jingwei's spirit returned every Lunar New Year to ensure her beloved books were not forgotten. Those who treated the library with respect, returning books on time, and reading with care, reported feeling a warm, comforting presence, as though the librarian herself approved of their actions. But woe befell those who disrespected the library. One infamous tale involves a student who stole a rare book as a prank. That night, he dreamed of a burning library and woke to find his room filled with the acrid smell of smoke. The stolen book had mysteriously reappeared on the library's steps the next morning, untouched but bearing scorch marks. In 1988, a young professor named Dr. Lin decided to visit the library while researching for his book on Chinese folklore. Intrigued by the tales of the ghost librarian, he spent Lunar New Year's Eve in the library's reading room, hoping for an encounter. As midnight approached, the library grew unnaturally still. The lights flickered, and the faint aroma of incense filled the air. Suddenly, a woman appeared at the far end of the room, her robe shimmering in the dim light. She carried a manuscript, its edges glowing faintly. Dr. Lin was mesmerized but remained seated, watching as she approached a nearby table. The ghost placed the manuscript down and gestured for him to open it. Hesitant but curious, Dr. Lin complied. The pages were filled with intricate calligraphy, each character radiating a golden hue. As he read, he felt an indescribable connection to the text, as though it were imparting wisdom directly into his soul. When he looked up to thank her, the apparition was gone. The manuscript had vanished, but Dr. Lin's understanding of his research deepened profoundly. He later published a groundbreaking book, attributing his insights to his mysterious encounter. The legend of the ghost librarian became a cherished part of the Lunar New Year celebrations in Seattle's Chinese community. Families began visiting the library during the holiday, leaving offerings of tea and incense at a small shrine dedicated to Madame Jingwei. Children listened wide-eyed as elders recounted her tale, instilling a deep respect for knowledge and tradition. Some visitors claimed to see the librarian during these visits. She would appear briefly, her serene face lit with a faint smile, before fading into the shadows. Others reported feeling a comforting presence as they read, as though she were guiding them in their pursuit of knowledge. In 2012, a renovation project uncovered a hidden basement beneath the library. Among the debris, workers found a charred but intact manuscript. Experts determined it to be an ancient text from the Ming Dynasty, believed to be the very manuscript Madame Jingwei had tried to save during the fire. The discovery reignited interest in her story, with many seeing it as proof of her enduring dedication. The manuscript was placed in a glass case in the library's main hall, alongside a plaque honoring Madame Jingwei's sacrifice. Visitors often report feeling a sense of peace when they approach the display, as though the librarian's spirit finally found solace. The evergreen Lunar Library remains a cornerstone of Seattle's Chinatown, a place where the past and present intertwine. During the Lunar New Year, the library comes alive with cultural events, from poetry readings to traditional dance performances. Amid the festivities, the legend of the ghost librarian endures, reminding all who enter of the power of knowledge, the importance of respect, and the enduring legacy of Madame Jingwei. And on quiet Lunar New Year nights, when the library is bathed in the soft glow of lanterns, some say you can still hear the rustle of pages and the faint recitation of ancient poetry. Perhaps it is the wind, or perhaps it is Madame Jingwei, ensuring that her sanctuary of knowledge remains vibrant and cherished for generations to come. The Midnight Drummer of San Francisco. Amid the vibrant streets of San Francisco's Chinatown, the Lunar New Year is celebrated with a burst of colors, lion dances, and the resonating beats of drums and cymbals. But amidst the revelry, a darker tale lingers in the shadows of the festivities. The story of the Midnight Drummer, a ghostly figure who returns each year to remind the living of an ancient betrayal. The tale dates back to the late 1800s when Chinatown was a haven for Chinese immigrants who brought with them rich traditions and a fierce sense of community. Among them was Zhang Wei, a young drummer known for his unmatched skill. His drumming was said to summon spirits, ward off evil, and bring prosperity to the community. Every Lunar New Year, he would lead the parade, his beats energizing the dancers and guiding the dragons through the crowded streets. Zhang Wei was also deeply in love with Mei Lin, the daughter of a prominent merchant. Their love was pure but frowned upon by Mei Lin's father, who considered Zhang Wei too poor and lowly to be a suitable match. Determined to prove himself, Zhang Wei promised to play the most extraordinary drum performance during the upcoming Lunar New Year celebration, earning the respect of the entire community and Mei Lin's father. On the eve of the Lunar New Year, Zhang Wei's rival, Li Jun, a fellow drummer jealous of his talent and Mei Lin's affection, hatched a sinister plan. Li Jun sabotaged Zhang Wei's drum, loosening its bindings so it would collapse mid-performance. When the moment arrived, Zhang Wei's drum shattered with a deafening crack, silencing the parade and humiliating him in front of the entire community. Heartbroken and shamed, Zhang Wei disappeared that night. Days later, his body was found floating in the bay, clutching the broken remnants of his drum. The community mourned his loss, but whispers of his restless spirit soon began to spread. The following Lunar New Year, as the clock struck midnight, the sound of a lone drum echoed through the streets of Chinatown. The beats were haunting, filled with sorrow and fury. Some claimed to see a shadowy figure, its hand striking an invisible drum with a rhythm so captivating that it froze spectators in place. Elders recognized the rhythm as Zhang Wei's signature style, one he had crafted for the parade. The ghostly drumming continued every year, always at midnight, and always accompanied by a chilling wind that swept through the streets. It became known as the Midnight Drummer's Lament. Over time, the legend took on a darker tone. Those who mocked Zhang Wei's ghostly performance or dismissed his pain were said to suffer misfortune. A shopkeeper who loudly proclaimed the drumming a hoax found his store mysteriously flooded the next day. A tourist who laughed at the tale tripped during the parade and broke his arm. These incidents only fueled the community's belief that Zhang Wei's spirit sought not only remembrance but also respect. In 2014, a young journalist named Claire, skeptical of ghost stories, decided to spend Lunar New Year's Eve in Chinatown, determined to debunk the Midnight Drummer legend. Armed with a camera and a recorder, she stationed herself at the parade's endpoint, where the drumming was most often reported. As midnight approached, the festive noise of the parade faded, replaced by an eerie silence. The air grew cold, and a faint, rhythmic drumming began to echo through the narrow streets. Claire checked her recorder, noting that the sound was unaccounted for by any visible source. Then she saw him, a translucent figure dressed in traditional attire, his hands striking a phantom drum with precision and intensity. Frozen in awe, Claire watched as the figure turned toward her, his eyes filled with sorrow. A sudden gust of wind knocked her camera from her hands, and when she picked it up, the figure was gone. Reviewing her footage later, she found nothing but an audio recording of the drum beats and a faint whisper, "Remember me." Today, the Midnight Drummer's Tale is an integral part of San Francisco's Lunar New Year celebrations. Locals leave small offerings, coins, red envelopes, and even miniature drums at the spot where Zhang Wei's spirit is said to appear. These gestures are believed to honor his memory and ensure prosperity for the coming year. The drumming also inspired a new tradition. At the stroke of midnight, a moment of silence is observed before the parade's final drum performance, a tribute to Zhang Wei's enduring spirit. Many believe that by paying their respects, they can transform his sorrow into blessings for the community. The Midnight Drummer's story is more than a ghost tale. It is a cautionary reminder of the consequences of jealousy and betrayal. It also underscores the importance of preserving traditions and respecting those who dedicate their lives to their art. And so, every Lunar New Year, as the streets of Chinatown fill with joyous celebration, a spectral rhythm lingers in the air. Some hear it as a mournful lament, others as a powerful reminder of the past. But all agree on one thing. The Midnight Drummer's beats echo not just in the streets, but in the hearts of those who listen.